Hey, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a level 100 dexterity build that I just had a ton of fun with. This is going to be using a key Nagakiba as well as the Coil Shield, and we're going to use a couple different ways to boost our AR, and I'll discuss that in detail in just a moment. We're going to put 50 points into Vigor, 22 into Endurance, 18 into Strength since we need that to single hand the Nagakiba, and then we're going to do 54 into Dexterity, but I do have Millicent's Prosthesis on, which raises that by 5, which is where the 59 comes from. We'll be using the Mushroom Crown as well as Kindred Rot's Exaltation to boost our AR once we proc Poison. We'll also use the Roar Medallion to boost our Roar Ashes of War, and the Great Jar's Arsenal to boost our Equip Load, which allows us to wear the Malformed Dragon Greaves, Tree Sentinel Gauntlets, and Beast Champion Armor. We're only going to have 71 poise, which is a little bit low compared to some of the other builds that I've done, but we'll discuss why that's okay in just a minute. I'll be using the Dexterity Knot as well as the Crimson Bubble tier. The first tier I think is pretty optional. You could use something like the Spiky Crack tier, which boosts successive attacks, which would pair well with the Millicent's Prosthesis, but I find that the duration of that particular tier isn't long enough to really be super useful, so I prefer to just have something like a Dexterity Knot, but there's definitely some flexibility when it comes to the first tier that you're going to use. The moveset for this build is going to be all the normal moves associated with just a katana build, so we'll have regular slashes, we'll have jumping heavies as well as jumping lights, running heavies, which are going to be pretty strong. But the most fun part about this build, I would say, is using the Barbaric Roar Ash of War, which gives us a unique heavy attack. So that's what it looks like uncharged, and it has 5 hits if you press R2 twice. So the first 3 is the initial part, and then you also get the follow-up 2 if you hit R2 again after that first part. So that can be really powerful, and you can also charge it, so it does much more damage, and that would pair well with the Axe Talisman, which would give you more AR associated with your charged attacks. However, we already have so many different talismans that are stacking buffs that it's going to be not super necessary, I found. So essentially the plan here is to use Viper Bite early on in the fight to proc poison, and it does a ton of deadly poison buildup, which means that you're pretty likely to get the status proc in one hit with Viper Bite and also a little bit of damage, and also you'll have the bonus of it pressuring. So once the status is procced, you'll get the Mushroom Crown to boost your AR as well as the Kindred Rot Talisman, and then you can switch over and do Barbaric Roar, which also boosts your AR. And then you also have Millicent's Prosthesis to boost AR associated with successive attacks, which pairs really well with the 3 to 5 hit combo that you can get with the Barbaric Roar Ash of War. So this is going to be a lot of buff stacking, but I found it to work out actually fairly well in invasions and to not be super cumbersome. You could also self-buff with poison. I believe there's a consumable that poisons you instantly, and then you can just remove poison, but I didn't feel like that was within the spirit of the build, and this meant that I could use Viper Bite on the Coil Shield more, which I absolutely love. So that was my setup for this, and we'll jump into the invasions in just a moment and see how practical this is. I did also want to mention that once you use Barbaric Roar, you get a ton of hyper armor with this particular attack. So as long as you start the attack, you probably won't get stun locked out of it. I only found a few things, like Waves of Gold would knock me out of that particular attack. It also has the benefit of having a really wide hitbox, so I would sometimes hit people that were nearly directly behind me just with some of those back swings. So I found Barbaric Roar on Nagakiba to be awesome. It recently was buffed in 1.07, and I just think it's fantastic all around. That's everything that I wanted to say about the setup and the strategy we'll be employing here. I would also like to mention, if you'd considered subscribing, that would be awesome. I am trying to hit a goal of 1,000, and we're definitely getting closer, so if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I would really appreciate it. But yeah, let's just go ahead and jump into the invasions. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we have a 3v1 at the area outside the Radon boss fight, which means I'm not really going to have any PvE help, and I'm not going to have too much space, but I do have the advantage of just kind of the varying terrain, so having some incline can definitely be helpful. Having some rocks to hide behind is going to be useful, and I'm able to quickly get off my poison proc and get my buffs out, which does assist me in this first chase down here with this first Phantom, and I'm able to get a roll catch there with the running R2, which I find to be fantastic for roll catching, especially once you kind of get the timing down of their panic rolling. Next we have just kind of the middle part of this fight, which is going to be a 2v1, and there's going to be a lot of magic spam coming my way. We have the host that's a wizard that's just repeatedly casting those swords that kind of gradually fly at you. And then we have the Phantom, who switched over to the Halo Scythe and is using the Ash of War that sends those discs my way. So I'm trying to avoid this for the most part and just look for an opportunity. The Halo Scythes have more range than those blue daggers, so I'm trying to stay out of range of those until I can kind of make my move. And I find this to be a good moment. I come in for a jumping attack and take some damage in the process. You'll notice that those blue daggers are hitting me for just a ton of damage, like way more than I was expecting, and I almost die in that moment. I'm not sure why I didn't get hit by that last one. I think maybe it's just because I was moving a little bit, but it looked like that could have killed me, so I was happy that I made it out of there all right. And then I continue on with the chase down, and you'll notice that the deadly poison from Viper Bite is applying some additional pressure in this situation, and that's going to be one of my favorite things about Viper Bite and deadly poison is just you can get it off early in the invasion and it will continue to chip and apply pressure until it runs out. So it runs out a little bit faster than normal poison, but if they don't deal with it, it's going to be significant. So once it's just a 1v1, the wizard host goes for this particular spell that sends a lot of skulls your way, and those also are doing a decent amount of damage, and they have Carrion Slicer, and every one of those hits is taking about a quarter of my HP. So I'm trying to regroup and just figure out what the best approach is. I back up until I think I'm out of range of the skulls and go for some jar cannon attacks. Just based on the amount of damage I'm receiving from the host, I'm anticipating they don't have a ton of HP and that they've just put everything they have into intelligence. And I was hoping to get some jar cannon damage, especially since they are in water. I used the lightning bolts, which are more beneficial in water, but I wasn't able to hit them. And potentially I should have stuck with the jar cannon and just kept going for those type of attacks rather than try to get a window of opportunity in this kind of Carrion Slicer and Skull magic combo. But I did feel like it was worth it, and eventually I determined that, okay, I think if I can just kind of trade into it, I'll take one Carrion Slicer, and then with the two-handed Nagakiba, I'll be able to get enough poise damage to prevent them from getting any more Carrion Slicers in, and that's how it went. And I was able to just kind of two-shot them with normal light attacks, and yeah, it was honestly pretty difficult just because magic has so much potential for getting kills really quickly, especially with Carrion Slicer, and you just have so much initiative as a mage. So finding that window was difficult. Being able to correctly determine that I'd be able to trade into at least one Carrion Slicer and then poise damage them the rest of the way was great. But it was definitely kind of a scary invasion just from that perspective. Next up we have a 2v1, and I'm able to get kind of a Dark Souls 3 backstab on that one person that, I was a little bit surprised that connected, and so I went for a second one on this host when they go for Taker's Flame, and that doesn't work out, but I am able to get the guard break there and get most of their HP. I think they're still alive, and then I go for the wake up with Viper Bite. They guard for it, which was smart, but it does guard break them. And that's something that's nice about Viper Bite is it does a lot of stamina damage, so the amount of times that I've found I've guard broken someone with Viper Bite is kind of surprising in my opinion. And it also does do poison buildup through the shield, so not quite as much as if they weren't guarding, but it's, you can typically hit them once with Viper Bite even if they're blocking, and then follow up with some poison throwing knives or something, and that will proc poison pretty quickly, and it's pretty effective. And so you'll see me using the poison bone darts as well as the other poison consumable that kind of throws a bunch of poison rocks at your opponent's direction. This next one is a 2v1 that I got a little frustrated in, not gonna lie. The Swift Glintstone Dart or whatever that spell is called can kind of rub me the wrong way, so for a while I kind of stuck with the Phantom here, but enough magic spam came my way and it was chipping me effectively that I decided I just kind of needed to change my approach, and that I was going to apply some pressure to the host, and if the Phantom wanted to help out, that was great, but if they weren't going to protect their host, then that was kind of going to be their problem. So I normally like to go for the Phantom first, but just some builds I feel are a little bit, I don't know, your best approach is maybe going to be to go for the host first. So I am able to get the host down and then switch over to a parry, and I'm able to kill the Phantom as well. So it was the whole party, but you know, typically I would go for the host first, and that ends up working out in my favor just with the quickness of the Nagakiba. Next up we have a 3v1, and it quickly turns into a 2v1 just with a jumping attack and a follow-up light attack on the wizard there. But we do have another wizard who's the host, and somebody with dual Godskin Peelers, which is pretty scary in terms of potential blood buildup. So if they hit me too many times with that, I think I definitely will bleed and probably die. So we can see there that they do land a jumping attack, but not a ton of bleed buildup. And also the setup that I have has a fairly high blood meter, so that's kind of working in my favor. However, the magic coming from the wizard there is, you know, pretty significant. Each one of those spells hitting me does close to a quarter of my HP again, but I am able to land Barbaric Roar's heavy attack and get the Phantom down their health a little bit, and I also do have the poison buildup on them, which is also applying pressure. So that ends up being useful, and it's worth noting that I believe the Barbaric Roar R2 is a true combo for those first 3 hits. It may be possible to poise through it if you have like really high poise, but I found that I was true comboing almost those 3 hits all the time. Next up we have a 2v1 that kind of started off on the wrong foot. I turned that corner maybe a little bit too quickly and got hit with Rivers of Blood, so I try to back up, get my physic applied, and then just kind of get out of range of the spells and maybe handle this Rivers of Blood user as a 1v1. So I quickly get the poison proc with Viper Bite, go for my Barbaric Roar Ash of War, and then here you can see I get the 3-hit combo with Barbaric Roar's R2, and I'm able to essentially one-shot them with the combo. And then it's just a one-on-one, which is much more manageable, especially when they run out of FP, and I go for a running heavy, and they have under 500 health. So that was enough there to just kind of take care of that opponent. This next one is a 2v1 that turns into a 3v1, and this one was fairly difficult. We had a Phantom with 2 of the Waves of Gold swords, and then we also have dual Vike Spears from the host, and then we'll have a blue be coming in later. The blue ended up, I think, being beneficial in how this worked out. I switch off my talisman from the one that will prevent madness buildup, and that definitely wasn't the play. I will be switching back to it later, and you'll see just how much bigger my madness bar will get because that talisman raises focus. So that's something I'm trying to incorporate more, is just using the talisman that raises focus more often because it's pretty helpful. There I go for a backstab attempt, and it's just absolutely not the play. I get hit by the Phantom for quite a bit of damage and kind of head back here to regroup. Because there's this PvE cat right there, I'm able to kind of regroup without needing to worry that they're going to follow me because they don't want to aggro it. But the blue comes in and does aggro it, which works out in my benefit for sure. And that was kind of my goal of baiting the blue over towards me, and the cat ends up helping me out there and taking care of the blue. It also knocks me on the ground so I don't get hit by the madness snipe, which is great. And then I'm able to regroup again and just get rid of the madness proc, which was super beneficial. I think if I had gotten madness there, I definitely could have died. So here I began pressuring the host a little bit and going for my Barbaric Roar Ash of War. I'm a little bit more buffed now because I think I'm going to need that extra damage output. And there's a little bit of a delay with my packet hitting the Phantom, and I think I might have won out on that trade, like they would have been stun locked, but I'm not 100% sure. Either way, with a little bit of packet delay, they hit me, and it's definitely a bad trade. I go for some Viper Bite attacks just to further buff my setup, you know, since that's kind of what we're going for. But they're not really being baited in. They played it kind of smart. And here I go for another backstab, doesn't work out, and get hit with Waves of Gold. So this one is just, I feel like it's getting away from me a little bit. And right at that time, the cat comes in, which is perfect. It kind of distracts the host and turns it into a one-on-one. So here I can kind of begin the process of applying my buffs. So I trade Waves of Gold for a Viper Bite, which doesn't end up poisoning them, but I do have the Bone Darts, which means that I'm able to quickly get that poison proc and buff my damage, and then go for Barbaric Roar to also buff my damage, and just kind of wait for the opportunity to get in there. I did switch off Millicent's Prosthesis earlier just to raise my focus, so I'm not getting quite as much damage from my successive attacks as I normally would, but here you can see I'm able to land 2 hits from that heavy attack from Barbaric Roar, and that does a decent amount of damage. We also have the continued pressure of the poison buildup, which is just, you know, kind of slowly ticking away at their health. And that ends up being really useful. They don't have a ton of healing flasks. I think right there they just used their last one, and you can see that they're kind of going to take a back seat. Finally, I do get the backstab on the Vike Spear user, which was definitely nice, because those first two ones where I went for the backstab and then got punished were a little bit rough, so it was nice to kind of make up for it in this latter half of the fight. And then I go for another backstab and land it off of a jumping L1 from the Vike Spear, and go for a heavy attack with the hopes of kind of being a wake up there, but don't quite get it. And the host is able to get away. The Phantom reminds me that they're still here and goes for some bow attacks, but I'm able to just kind of quickly run over to them and go for a jumping light attack, which has really nice range on the Nagakiba, and I'm able to take them out. And now it's, again, a one-on-one. Again, I go for a backstab, but can't be punished from the Phantom because they're dead now, so that ends up working out in my favor. And now I begin going for some more of the Barbaric Roar, fully charged heavy attacks. The host here is a little less aggressive now that it's just a one-on-one situation, which doesn't work out in my favor in terms of landing the Barbaric Roar heavy attack. I find that once you have somebody that's really aggressive, you'll frequently be able to trade into it. You'll get hit by their first attack, but then they'll be stun locked for your next 2 or 3, depending on how many you hit. And there I am finally able to land the full combo, and the poison does the rest. So that was just a nice 3v1 that, you know, was up against some fairly meta builds that had potential to do lots of damage, and this build kind of came through clutch with a little bit of help from PvE, but I was happy to win it nonetheless. Next up we have a 3v1 that's kind of chaotic. We have Rivers of Blood and just a lot of swords coming my way. I try to bring everybody into this room that just has so much PvE in it, and I think that's a helpful distraction. I get backstabbed after going to Viper Bite, but I think that was actually to my benefit. I think the iframes that you get during the backstab worked out to just kind of avoid some of the damage that the Phantoms would have brought my way. And then I do land the Viper Bite, but it doesn't quite proc poison, so I switch over to the Poison Bone Darts, and that's enough to get the host poisoned. And at this point, the Phantoms are really not helping out their host, so I go for a couple attacks. I wasn't really planning on killing the host here, and technically the poison did, so I don't know if that counts as a host first kill. I would have preferred to get the full group, but sometimes it just kind of works out that way. Next up we have what should have been a 2v2, but ends up kind of being a 3v1, and we kind of go for some Viper Bites just to apply some pressure and are getting into the rhythm of this fight. I go for a backstab attempt there, don't quite land it, and then this Phantom kind of surprises me. I thought it was just a taunted tongue person, but there was a Phantom also in the world, and they've got the dual malicious shuttles, I believe. Basically, they're bleed halberds, so I do kind of need to look out for that. The blood buildup between these two weapons, both the Phantom and the host have, are kind of scary, so I'm trying to keep a eye on that, as well as the frost meter that is kind of building quickly. So I do get off a Barbaric Roar heavy attack and then land a jumping attack. I'm also trying to avoid some of the hits coming my way from the host, but they kind of get baited into another heavy attack from Barbaric Roar, which is honestly just so good. It's such a good way to depressurize the system and get a really nice turn and burn. Next, I think at this point another red has been summoned into the world, and yeah, you can see there that the Phantom starts fighting the other red. So I'm not sure exactly if this is 3v1, 2v1, what it is, but basically the red is about to kill the other Phantom, which turns it into a 2v1 with me and the red, except the red decides that they're going to be a traitorous co-invader, and I try to discourage them a little bit with some bone darts before I actually am going to go in for the kill, but they definitely get the traitorous red of the week award. Maybe we can turn that into a meme, I'm not sure, but essentially they start using me as parry practice, which I don't find to be the best decision, especially when you have somebody using Bloodhound Fang, which is just a great weapon to parry against because the Ash of War is so predictable. So I try to kind of mess with their brain a little bit, delay my attacks a lot, and then jump into other attacks, and I finally just get a heavy attack that takes them out. and it takes me a minute to find my point down emoji, or emote rather, but eventually I do find it. Hopefully they hadn't been gone out of the world before they saw that, so I don't use the point down too much, but occasionally you have a player that really really kind of earns it, I would say. And then finally, it's just a one-on-one with the Rune Arced host here. I go for some more Viper Bite. I'm trying to time it with their Ash of War, and I managed to get the Viper Bite just in the right time within the context of their follow-up for the Ash of War. And then I go for Barbaric Roar, so now I've got all my buffs applied and just kind of go for some big damage. And there you can see I got close to half their health with just a heavy attack, which is awesome. You don't have to go for the unique heavy associated with Barbaric Roar because all your damage is going to be buffed at this point. And it's a lot of fun too, but just not totally necessary. I do get hit with the first part of their Ash of War, but then they go for the follow-up, which allows me to roll into it and get the backstab, which I find to be pretty consistent for the follow-up to that specific Ash of War, especially because you can kind of roll through their character model in some scenarios, which gives you a nice kind of direct line of a pathway, at least, to get that backstab. Next up we have a 2v1, and I'm not 100% sure what weapon the host is using. It looks like something you might get from the boss fight related to that giant like elk in the Ancestral Woods area, but regardless, I start trying to apply some pressure. I get some poison. I get one hit with the Viper Bite, but it doesn't quite proc the poison there. So I did try to follow it up with some poison consumables. Don't manage to hit them, so no poison yet, but I'm pretty confident that I'll get it soon, and there we're able to stun lock them out of their jumping attack. And that's something to note about Viper Bite, is its potential to stun lock is fantastic. I definitely stun lock people out of their jumping attacks frequently, and now that I'm pretty buffed, I'm able to get off fully charged heavy and take out most of the HP from the Phantom, and now it's just a one-on-one. I will note that the weapon that the host is using did a surprising amount of damage. You'll see that I miss out on some trades and just get a bunch of damage taken right there and then there again, so I need to roll out and kind of recover. Definitely wasn't expecting that level of damage to come from that particular weapon, but that's alright. I am able to kind of regroup here, kind of set things back to neutral, and the host goes for their Ash of War, but that allows me to go for a jumping attack, and then I land Viper Bite again, which gets the Deadly Poison proc, and then I go for Barbaric Roar. And at this point, I think the kind of pressure is working in my favor. I get one of the swings from the Ash of War, and then I go for a trade with the fully charged heavy attack, and that's enough to take care of the host. So definitely a nice combo there between the different buffs, and frequent attacks meant that my Millicent's Prosthesis was working as well. It was just kind of the ideal scenario. Next up we have a pretty short invasion. This person is just kind of swinging away with their Bloodhound Fang, and they unfortunately back up into the giant chariot, and I see if I can get the Viper Bite through the door. It does work through walls, but I am able to get it one more time, and that's enough to finish off the host. So I always feel like the Viper Bite as a finisher is kind of fun. Next up we have a 2v1, and this one I put in here mostly because it's just a demonstration of how much hyper armor that you get with the Barbaric Roar heavy attack. So you'll see first how much poise damage it does. It guard breaks both opponents simultaneously, which is pretty awesome, even the one directly behind me, which kind of speaks to the range that particular heavy attack has. And then I do manage to get a backstab, which is pretty nice here. I go for some Viper Bite as well, and I'm not sure if I demonstrated it earlier, but at some point somebody hits me with a Colossal Sword, and I'm able to just hyper armor through it. So I thought it was that invasion, but I think it's another one. Sorry about that. But that one just kind of worked out in my favor. I had a nice backstab to it. This next one I kind of included just because I thought it was kind of funny. There's a host that I imagine is trying to AFK rune farm here, but there is a way to reach them. So I start hopping up this little rock, and I think surprise this mage build that's just kind of hanging out here waiting for blues to get summoned into the world. And they've made the mistake of not killing any PvE, so I was pretty confident this was going to be over pretty fast. I got a couple quick hits in, and they're about to run into a whole field of Albinurics, so it's going to be kind of dangerous for them, especially with them cartwheeling around with their spikes and everything. So I thought this was going to be it, but they managed to escape with pretty much 1 HP. I'm going for fan daggers just to finish them off quickly, but they manage to get out of there, and then they pull out the Moon Veil. So I do need to be a little bit more careful. They've kind of depressurized the system a little bit, but I managed to get a nice long-range Viper Bite attack off, and that kind of just demonstrates how much range that particular attack has. It's much further than most people assume, I think. And it also pairs really well with a double roll. So I think if somebody is rolling and you go for Viper Bite mid-roll, they're going to think the timing of it is going to be a little bit sooner than it is, but it actually is pretty delayed, and so they'll usually just panic roll into a second roll. And I found that Viper Bite would frequently land as a roll catch for that second roll, which just kind of speaks to the range that it has, that somebody can roll twice and you can get the Viper Bite hit off that second one. Then we had a blue come in with about 500 HP, so I'm able to quickly land 2 heavy attacks and continue the chase down here. And we can see that the Viper Bite Deadly Poison is still pressuring, which is really nice. Here, I think I had input get eaten by the game, and I'm not able to roll to dodge that Moon Veil. So I just kind of need to reset to neutral here, and I'm expecting to need to get some carry and retaliation, but most of their spells that I'm preparing for just end up hitting the Albinauric, and I start going for heavy attacks, or light attacks rather, and you can see the Millicent's Prosthesis also is taking effect, and we got a bleed kill, which was kind of surprising. There's only 45 bleed buildup associated with this weapon, and we're not buffing it in any capacity, but they got hit by so many phantom hits that eventually it was able to kind of get the bleed proc. This next one is one that I just thought was pretty funny. We start out with some jar cannon attacks, just to kind of let them know that we're here and potentially get some chip damage. I go for just my physic buff, and I'm trying to kind of get the lay of the land, figure out my approach here, and I see that somebody's got the giant Crozier hammer, I think it's called, and I don't really engage too much with it. I'm hoping to get the Phantom. I get a couple quick hits and then I see that happen, and so I am a little skeptical about how to approach this at this point. I know that this is going to be a little bit interesting, so I just decide to put my sights on the Phantom. I get a heavy attack in and then don't manage to land the light attack. The hitbox for that was a little bit weird. I thought it would managed to connect, but not quite there, although there is some strangeness in terms of packet lostness, so that might have been part of the issue. And now we just have like kind of absolute craziness. I have no idea when hits are going to land. I think I managed to hit the Viper Bite, but it's not totally clear. And then a blue comes in with better connection, and there we can see something very strange. I'm not sure how I didn't just get a connection error with this one, but I really wanted to include it just for the funny teleporting that we're seeing from the host and kind of the moon walking across the sky, which is always entertaining. So me and this blue are kind of having a good battle, I would say. They have dual katanas, I have one katana, and then all the hits from the host, wherever they were throughout the duration of that invasion, just kind of hit simultaneously, and it ends up being a little bit rough, but I just kind of thought that one was funny, just given the amount of packet loss in one invasion. I don't think I'd ever seen it that bad. So next up we have a 2v1, and I do need to be worried about like the giant jawbone hammer, just because the Ash of War for that is kind of scary, but my Viper Bite does come out slightly faster than their Ash of War, and I'm able to stun lock them out of their own Ash of War while getting the poison proc. And then with that added AR bonus, I get the full combo with the Barbaric Roar R2 off on the Phantom and turn this into a 1v1, which is pretty solid. And they kind of continuously go for that, which gives me an opportunity to get a light attack in, and I get one more light attack in and just kind of begin pressuring, and then I want to go for the roll catch there. And there you can see just the double roll Viper Bite timing ends up working out, and I find that to be something that I've gotten fairly consistently. It's just the people will roll once, you'll begin the Viper Bite attack mid-roll, and then they'll panic roll a second time, and they'll still be within range. This next one I just thought was a fun, extremely quick one. Oh, and this is the one that has the hyper armor through the Colossal Sword attack. So you can see there that I just traded twice with the Barbaric Roar. I'm not even sure if it was a charged attack. It was just the heavy, I think. And I just totally hyper armored through both of those Colossal Sword attacks with only 71 poise. So that's why I felt like I didn't need higher poise on this build. I think having that hyper armor, I mean, it was really nice. It kind of almost felt like DS3, where you don't really need to worry about your armor too much, and as long as you have the right attack for the right moment, you can just utilize hyper armor. But I think people's unfamiliarity with Barbaric Roar, especially on one of these lighter weapons like a katana, they're not expecting to be stun locked for so long, and they're not expecting for you to be able to trade so successfully into it. And that's just like one of the reasons I found this build to be particularly successful, even though it is a little bit memey in terms of all the buffs that you need to try to stack. And, you know, using Coil Shield is never going to be meta, I don't think. Maybe, I don't know. Probably not, but I would like it to be, I guess. This next one is going to be the second to last invasion that I have, but the last invasion that I do have, I was streaming during, and while a lot of these were streamed in just like the stream from yesterday, I didn't have the audio set up correctly, so normally I don't record my voice from stream in these, but in this case, for the last invasion, not this one, my voice was still in it, so I'm not going to do commentary over the last one. So this will be the last one with commentary, and that was kind of a long way of saying that. But anyway, we do have a 2v1 situation where we're getting a lot of Ash of War spam from that jawbone weapon, and I'm really just trying to make sure that I keep my rolls timed correctly and not get too over ambitious and just kind of wait for a good opportunity to rush in. I do go for a very, very incorrectly thrown frost pot there. I tried to free aim it and just totally missed, and in that case I definitely got punished, which was okay. But here I go for, I finally am able to roll in and just get a couple quick attacks out. The Bloodhound Fang is able to get an Ash of War off on me, which does a decent amount of my health, and I kind of need to regroup, just kind of come in for another approach. That stun lock, I think, prevented me from taking out the Phantom. So I begin just to apply a little bit of pressure to the host and try to take advantage of the fact that PvE is now involved. And the Phantom there has kind of switched up their tactics. I go for a backstab here, just with that very predictable second part of the Ash of War, and manage to land it. And here this was kind of bold. I go in despite not having very much health, and my tier saves me, so the Crimson Bubble tier just is able to give me a little bit more of HP restored, and I didn't die there, which was really nice. And so I kind of regroup, use this kind of fallen chariot thing to my advantage, and just, you know, if you block the person's view, the function of this Ash of War in particular is much more like a projectile than anything else. It's not like Rain of Arrows where you just have to be locked on. So I use that to my advantage, and I'm able to get a couple hits in and begin the chase down process. I managed to jump over some of the swings from the Bloodhound Fang, which was great. And there I'm able to finally get the last kill just before they heal, which is really nice. It just kind of speaks to the quickness of the Nagakiba, and one of the reasons it's so strong, the quickness and the range. It is just kind of one of the two benefits, and it doesn't have a ton of hyper armor or poise damage unless you're using the full combo from Barbaric Roar. So all those things together really work out really well and are part of the reason that I love using this build so much. And Barbaric Roar on Nagakiba is it's really strong and a lot of fun. You can see that there. It does enough to finish that invasion. So yeah, that's all I got, and we'll jump into the last one where I had live commentary. Guy looks a little laggy, but we'll see. Shadows work. Oh. Okay, not sure about that connection, but nice. Poison proc. Now we'll just go for the heavy attack. And that works. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. Appreciate everybody who's been, supportive in comments, subscribing, adding to watch time, that sort of thing. And I just had so much fun with this build. So if you'd like to see, maybe a second version of this build or more invasions with it, definitely let me know. I I'm kind of sad to put this one away. But yeah, that's all I got, and I hope you have a good one.